The vibration reached my boots before the sound reached my ears, a low grinding thrum that traveled through limestone and into the roots of vines that had been drinking from this ridge for 40 years. I didn't look up right away. I finished taping the graft thumb smoothing wax across the join with the same pressure I'd used 1,000 times. Airtight. Clean. Only then did I stand and turn toward the property line. Dust hung over the old Brooks place like a flare. The cottage had been empty for 2 years. Now it looked like a rushed battlefield. An excavator chewed at the earth less than 20 feet from my perimeter fence, its bucket swinging toward the limestone shelf that kept my drainage channels intact. A woman in a white blazer too clean for the site shouted over the diesel, pointing at a retaining wall that held more than her backyard in place. "No, take it down to bedrock," she yelled. "The photos are Friday." The operator revved. "Stop," I said. I didn't shout. I never do. My voice sits low the way a bass note sits under the rest of the noise. She didn't hear me. She kept pointing. I climbed the fence, not graceful, just efficient. I walked straight into the operator's line of sight and raised my hand, palm flat, static. He hesitated. He saw the boots, the shears on my belt, the way I stood like I belonged in the path of a moving machine. He killed the engine. Silence dropped heavy. Dust settled on her blazer. "Excuse me," she spun, eyes bright with adrenaline. Hazel flecked green, defensive. "You can't be here. I have a permit." "You have a permit to renovate," I said. "Not to destabilize the water table. I'm Ariella Brooks." She straightened, trying to reclaim height and control at the same time. "I'm managing this site." "Who are you, Santiago Reyes?" I pointed to the ground near her heels. A hairline fracture ran through the dry earth, leading toward the cliff edge. "You remove that shelf and the next rain doesn't just wash away my vines. It takes your patio into the Pacific." She looked down, looked back up. Her breath came fast, like she'd been running even while standing still. "I have a schedule," she said. "This property hits the market in 3 weeks. That wall is ugly. It's necessary. I can pay for a new one. Better. Soil doesn't care about money." I kept my voice even. It takes years for dirt to recover when you shock it. You're forcing it to fail. For a second, the corporate armor cracked. She looked like someone who had been awake for too many nights, staring at numbers that didn't add up. "I don't have years," she said, quieter. "I have weeks." "Then stop digging," I said, and turned back to my vines. 2 days later, the town council hall was stifling. The air conditioner had given up, and 50 people were packed into a room built for 30. Ariella stood at the front with a slide deck that was, I'll give her that, flawless. Renderings of the cliffside retreat. Glass walls, infinity deck, native landscaping. "The renovation will increase property values for the entire ridge," she said, voice clear, practiced. She treated the neighbors like a board she needed to win. I stayed in the back shoulder against the doorframe. Major Hughes, my foreman, leaned close. "She's slick, Santiago." Francis Price is circling. I tracked the room. Francis Price stood near a council member, smiling like a man who already owned the vote. "Mr. Reyes," the chair called. "Do you have an objection to the variance request?" The room quieted. They knew I didn't speak unless it mattered. "I don't object to the renovation," I said. "I object to the timeline." Ariella turned. Her hair was pulled into a severe bun, tight enough to hurt. "The cliff needs to settle," I continued. "We had heavy rains in March. The limestone is saturated. Pour concrete now and the weight shears the face off. Mr. Reyes just wants to protect his view." Francis Price cut in oily and confident. "This is about grapes, not geology." "It's about gravity," I said, keeping my eyes on Ariella. "You can rush paperwork. You can't rush physics." Ariella's gaze flicked from Francis to me. I saw the math behind her eyes: interest, payments, deadlines, panic. If we pause, she asked me directly, how long? 6 weeks. Let the water table drop. I can't do 6 weeks. Then you'll own a pile of rubble in 4, I said, soft enough to sting. The council voted to table the motion pending a geological survey. A delay. A loss for her. As people filed out, Francis moved through the crowd like oil. He leaned close to Councilman Denton, one hand resting on the man's elbow. Denton laughed. Francis glanced across the room like he was checking for witnesses. I took out my phone and snapped 2 photos, one of the contact, one with Denton's nameplate in frame. Not proof of a crime. Proof of proximity. Outside Major waited by my truck. Public records request, I told him. Denton's donations. Francis's LLCs. Anything with his name on it. Major's grin was thin. You want receipts? I want leverage that stays legal, I said. And I want it ready before she gets cornered. She caught me in the parking lot. The sun was dropping, long shadows stretching across the asphalt. You realize you just cost me a fortune in interest, she said, leaning against her car, rubbing her temples. I saved you a lawsuit, I replied. If my vines slide, I sue. If your house slides, you lose everything. I'm already losing everything, she muttered, and then the edge returned. Francis Price says if we don't list by peak season, Francis Price is a vulture. He's the only one helping me. He's pushing you to cut corners so he can buy it cheap when it fails inspection. She froze. The thought landed hard. It was the kind of trap you only see once it's around your ankle. I need a real survey, she said, not the guy Francis recommended. I'll do it, I said. She blinked. You're a winemaker. I'm a viticulturist, I corrected. I test soil for a living. Moisture density, slope behavior, every week. We'll document everything. Why help me? I looked at her shoulders, how they sat too high, how her jaw flexed like she was biting down on panic. Because you're loud, I said. And when you're stressed, you get louder. I need quiet for harvest. A laugh escaped her, short, surprised. It softened her face for half a second. Fine. Do your survey. But if you're wrong, I pour the concrete. The survey meant dawn on her property for a week. Best time of day. Mist clung to the vines. The ocean lay flat gray, indifferent. Ariella was always awake. She sat on the rotting porch with a laptop open, phone in hand, coffee going cold. She moved like a metronome, set too fast, typing, calling, negotiating. I set my penetrometer and moisture probes along the perimeter and worked in silence. On the 3rd morning, I found the rusted wind spinner half buried in overgrown grass, shaped like a ship, bent vanes, bearings seized with salt. I remembered her aunt standing here years ago watching it spin. I pulled it free and carried it back to my workshop. That night I took it apart, soaked the bearings, scraped the salt, tapped the bent metal against the anvil until it returned to true. Simple mechanics. Fixable. A problem that didn't argue back. I replanted it the next morning without a word. The wind caught it, and the ship began to spin smooth and steady. Ariella stopped typing. She stared at it like she'd forgotten how to pause. I thought that was gone, she said quietly. It just needed grease, I said, checking a gauge. My aunt used to watch that for hours, she said. She said it was the only thing here that didn't need a battery. She wasn't wrong. Ariella stood and walked over, stopping beside me. What's the ground saying today, Santiago? It's drying, I said, slowly. It needs time. I don't do time, she admitted, eyes still on the spinner. If I stop moving, I feel like I'll fall over. That's why you're digging so deep, I said. You're trying to pin your life down with concrete. She turned her head. Our eyes met. The waves hissed in the distance, and the only sound between us was the spinner clicking softly as the wind shifted. Neither of us moved. Her breath held for a beat, then released. "Show me," she said. "Show me how you know." I knelt and scooped a handful of soil's sandy loam with a darker dampness beneath the surface. "Squeeze it," I said, handing it over. Her hands were manicured, soft, shaking just a little. She squeezed. "If it holds a shape, it's too wet," I said. "If it crumbles instantly, it's too dry. You want it to hold for a heartbeat, then break." She opened her palm. The clump held for a second, and then fell apart. "Perfect," she whispered. "We're close," I said. "Another week of dry weather, and you can build the wall correctly. But it has to breathe stepping stones, not a solid slab." "Francis won't like that," she said. "He wants the slab. Francis isn't living here." "Neither am I," she reminded me. "I'm selling." "Right," I said, and turned back to the equipment before my face gave anything away. Saturday, I found her at the beach below the cliff. Low tide. I was checking erosion from the bottom up. She sat in the sand with shoes off a white linen cover-up, shrugged over a simple black swim top shaping wet sand into a small castle. Turrets leaned as the tide breathed in and out. "Crisis management?" I asked. She startled, then smiled. "Something like that. The retaining wall keeps collapsing." "You're using the wrong sand," I said. "Surface sand is dry." I added water. Too much. I dug into the darker, damp layer, packed it between my palms until it held. "Use what already binds." She watched my hands. "You have hands that look like they know what they're doing," she said. Factual, not flirtatious, like she was taking inventory of competence. "They're working hands," I said, keeping my eyes on the sand. She tried to mimic me, rushing again. The castle slumped. "You're fighting it," I said, voice low. "Ease into it." She froze, hands hovering. Then she took a breath that slowed her shoulders down. "You rush everything, don't you?" I added, lighter. "If I don't rush, the world catches up," she said. "My firm lost a major client. This house is my lifeboat. If I don't sell for top dollar, I drown. And if you sell it to Francis's buyer, they'll pave it," she said quietly. "I know they will." "There are other ways," I said. "Conservation easements, agricultural leases. You could keep the title lease, the buffer zone to me, lower your taxes, stabilize your cash flow." Her head lifted. The panic in her face shifted into focus. "Francis didn't mention that. Francis doesn't get paid on a lease." She looked at me for a long moment, and this time she didn't look away first. "Why are you giving me an exit? Because I don't like watching a vulture teach someone how to jump," I said. On the walk back up the cliff stairs, I stopped where the wind couldn't steal every word. I pulled a notepad and drew 3 boxes. "Option 1, I said, tapping the first. "List fast and pray Francis doesn't own the buyer." Her mouth tightened. "Option 2, I continued. "Delay do it right control inspection." "And option 3, she asked. I tapped the last box. "You keep the title. Lease to me. Easement to lock the cliff against concrete forever. It's not romance, Ariella. It's strategy." "You came prepared," she said. "I don't like being cornered," I replied. She nodded once, small, controlled. I wanted to cover her hand with mine. The thought didn't get words. My fingers dug into my knee, instead grip tightening until my knuckles went pale, a slow pressure that kept the rest of me still. I kept my hands where she could see them. She needed a partner, not a complication. The twist came Tuesday. Major Hughes walked into the fermentation shed and slapped a paper onto a barrel. "County notice," he said. "Francis filed a complaint. Claims your irrigation lines encroach on Brooks' property. Dug up a deed from 1950. I scanned the notice. A boundary dispute enough to freeze a title, enough to choke a sale. I drove to Ariella's cottage. Frances Price stood in her kitchen, holding a map. Ariella looked pale eyes fixed on a pen near the paperwork. "Santiago," she said, voice tight. "I know what he's doing," I cut in. I looked at Frances. "You freeze the title with a dispute, shorten her oxygen, then offer your buyer as rescue." Frances smiled. "Survey lines are clear. You've been stealing her water." Ariella looked at me. "Is it true, no?" I said. No drama. No pleading. I stepped closer to the table and placed my palm down beside the documents, not on them. A line in the sand. He's scaring you into signing something you won't be able to undo. "I can make it go away," Frances said smoothly. "Sign the exclusivity agreement today. Cash. Fast." A squeeze play dressed up as help. Ariella's fingers hovered over the pen. "Put it down," I said. She stared at me. "Not because I'm asking," I added. "Because you don't sign anything when the other guy built the clock." I pulled a plain folder from my jacket and slid it onto the table. Inside County GIS parcel overlay my irrigation permit, time-stamped photos of the drip lines at maintenance points. "Look," I told her. "Recorded boundary overlay. His line isn't the official record. It's a scanned sketch." Her eyes moved across the page fast, sharp. She shifted closer, shoulder near mine, and the pen stayed on the table. "Frances," she said, voice steady. "Now step back from my kitchen table." He laughed, but the sound was thinner. "You're taking the word of a vineyard guy over your broker. I'm taking the word of paperwork," she said. "Leave." He didn't move. I turned my head just enough to meet his eyes. "If you stay, I call the sheriff for trespass. If you leak a story, my attorney subpoenas your emails. Pick your hobby." His confidence flickered. He collected his map like it suddenly burned. "This isn't over," he said. "It is," Ariella replied, and held her ground. When the door shut, Ariella exhaled hard. "If this goes to court, it takes months. I don't have months." "We don't go to court first," I said. "We go to the ground. Sunrise, independent county surveyor. Major will film every step. Time stamp on. No gaps." She nodded once. "Okay." That night the storm hit. A true coastal gale. Wind screamed off the ocean. Rain lashed sideways. I was up at 2 a.m. checking drainage channels in the vineyard when I saw light burning in Ariella's cottage. Then I heard the crack. Not a tree. Wood snapping under load. I ran, vaulted the fence boots, slipping in mud. The old deck built on filled dirt, not bedrock, was buckling. The earth behind the retaining wall turned to slurry. I pounded the back door. Ariella opened it, soaked flashlight shaking in her hand. The fabric clinging to her arms offered no protection against the freezing rain. She looked like she'd bolted from sleep into a storm without time to think. "The deck," she shouted. "It's moving, get out," I said, and took her by the forearm. "Front. Now. My laptop, my papers, leave them." We scrambled to the driveway under the carport. Behind us, the deck gave with a groan, sliding 10 feet down the slope, taking a chunk of garden with it. Ariella shook violently, teeth chattering. I pulled my canvas jacket off and wrapped it around her, then stepped in front of her like a wall, shielding her from the wind with my body. "It's gone," she gasped. "The sail. The house." "The house is on bedrock," I said, mouth close to her ear so she could hear me. "The deck was on the fill, the part I warned you about." She looked up at me, rain streaming off her hair. "You told me." I did. Frances said it was safe. Frances lied. Her forehead touched my chest for a second, an exhausted, involuntary lean. "I almost signed," she whispered. "I almost signed his agreement." "Did you know?" she said. "I couldn't. I kept hearing you." "Ease into it." So I told him I needed 24 hours. Relief loosened something behind my ribs. "Good," I said. Now we use what the storm just revealed. At first light, the wind had dropped to a hard, wet silence. The ground still bled water. Ariella and I walked the edge of the scarp, carefully flashlight beams tracing the fresh shear line, while Major filmed from a safe distance. That's when I saw it. An iron property marker, rusted but solid, embedded deep into exposed bedrock, exactly where my grandfather's old map said it should be. I crouched and brushed mud away with my glove. The stake didn't budge. "That's the 1950 marker," I said. "It proves the line. Francis's boundary claim is dead." Ariella stared at it and then at the wreckage below. Her face changed, panic burning off, replaced by cold focus. "He tried to defraud me," she said. "Yes. And the drainage he recommended was blocked. I finished. And now we can show it." Ariella pulled out her phone, already recording. "Major, keep documenting. I want every angle time-stamped." "Already rolling," Major said, grim and satisfied. "Today we do a preliminary walkthrough," I told her. "This afternoon, the county surveyor comes to measure it officially and file the report. We keep our hands off the marker until he logs it." She nodded once sharp. "Understood." By midday, the county surveyor arrived with a transit orange flags and a clipboard that turned our footage into record. He took measurements, logged coordinates, photographed the stake, and signed the boundary confirmation on site. Major filmed the signatures. I copied the coordinates into my field book and then into a clean spreadsheet at my office, printed and stapled one copy for her safe, one for my locked file cabinet. 48 hours became paperwork and pressure. Ariella drafted a complaint with a timeline, attached screenshots of Francis's messages, and filed with the state board like she was building a case for a client who deserved to win. I looped in my environmental attorney, the same one I'd used when the county tried to push a highway ramp near my drainage corridor. Quiet leverage. Real. Francis stopped calling Ariella and started calling me. I didn't answer. 3 weeks later, we held a small gathering at the edge of the vineyard, where the grass met the stabilized buffer zone between our lands. Ariella negotiated a conservation easement that locked the cliff against irresponsible construction. She kept the title to the cottage and rented it as a high-end retreat. She leased the agricultural rights of the buffer zone to Reyes Vineyard. It solved her cash flow without selling the ridge to a developer. It protected my soil and took Francis's bait off the table. Francis Price wasn't there. He was dealing with an ethics board investigation and a broker review that Ariella had triggered with surgical precision. Ariella wore a soft blue dress that moved with the breeze and held a glass of my Pinot like she knew exactly what it cost to make. She spoke with the council chair, calm and in control. Then she found me by the barrel we used as a table. "You're quiet today," she said. "I'm listening," I replied. To what's left when the noise clears?" She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't ask for anything. Then she reached into her purse and slid a brass key across the barrel toward me. "Spare key to the cottage," she said, "for emergencies or inspections." It was practical. It was trust disguised as logistics. I covered the key with my hand. "I'll keep it safe." "I know you will," she said. She stepped closer. The crowd was still there, but the space between us narrowed anyway. Ariella lifted a hand and fixed my collar, her fingertips brushing the side of my neck. Her skin was warm against the cold air, and my breath caught, once silent, involuntary, before I set it back into control. "You were right," she said softly. "About the soil, about the rush." "I usually am," I said. She laughed. "Don't get cocky. Your truck is still too loud. I'll work on it." "Good." Her gaze held mine, steady and clear. "I'm not going anywhere, Santiago. I like the quiet here." "The quiet is good," I said. "But the right kind of noise is fine." I didn't kiss her in front of the council. I took her hand instead, calloused fingers threading through hers, anchoring public uncomplicated. She squeezed back once firm, and we stood side by side watching the sun sink behind the vines we now shared. Santiago didn't fix Ariella with speeches, he fixed the problem in front of them. The land needed time to settle, and so did she. When everything around you is pushing speed, control feels like safety. But control without evidence is just panic wearing a suit. Trust, the useful kind, is built the way a foundation is built, tested, documented, and done in layers. If you like romance, where the man stays steady and the storm doesn't win, like and subscribe for more stories like this.